My name is Dan Cuellar, and I'm here to talk about mobile automation made awesome with Appium. Or I should cross that out and just say automation made awesome, as you'll see later. So for those of you who don't know who I am, that's a photo of me. You can see it's the same person. I have a Twitter handle. Please follow me. I, at some point, want to do something that will require a lot of Twitter followers, or at least I think I might, so please follow. I created Appium many years ago. I currently am head of software testing at a company called Foodit in London. And before then, I worked at Zeus and Shazam and Microsoft and all these other fun places, heading up testing. And a long, long time ago, I went to school and got one of those shiny computer science degrees. So anyways, moving on from that, today we're going to talk about a number of things. So first, I'll start off with what is Appium, and I'll tell you a brief story about how it came about. And then once I have lulled you into sleep, I will hit you with what's new in Appium 1.6. We'll talk a bit about desktop apps with Appium, including some live demos. We'll talk about mobile automation with Appium, which is what most of you probably know it for. And then we'll go into some tips and tricks and advanced things. And then robots at the end, of course. I didn't bring it with me, but there'll be videos of that if you haven't seen that. So anyways, I'm here today to talk about Appium, which, as you can tell by the name, is Selenium for apps, I guess. So I'll tell you a brief story about how it came about, if those of you... So just show of hands, who here knows what Appium is? That's like less than half of you. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm glad I put these slides in here. So let me tell you a story. And it all starts with what I call the most terrifying 5 words in software testing. Can anyone venture a guess as to what these might be? I've heard that one before. It's 5. Yeah, it's a good set. If you count a contraction as being only 1 word. No, it's these. So who here... Okay, so people are laughing, so I think some people get the joke. This is a little less terrifying than it once was, but it all started when I started working at a dating site, and I was in charge of testing software and keeping everything working, and we had one of the 50 most highest grossing apps in the App Store. And we frequently released bugs where we lost lots of money. And what's inconvenient about the App Store is that when you make a mistake, in order to fix it, you have to talk to Apple and go through this several days long review process. So if you make a mistake, you live with it for a few days. And if you were to break something like, I don't know, maybe chat on a dating site, it might be broken for quite some time, and your manager might get progressively angrier and angrier at you. That is unfortunate about the App Store. So what it means for testers is that you have to get it right the first time, more so than you may be accustomed to if you work on a web product, where you control when the users get the code, you push code to the server, barring some browser caching, immediately it's delivered to your users. So I thought about this, and it all sounded like something I'd worked with before. So who here knows what this is? Oh, yeah. Sometimes I go to a room and I get like 3 or 4 hands, and I legitimately have to explain to people that we used to print software on these disks. But yeah, we used to print it on these disks, and the App Store is the same kind of paradigm wherein you print it to the App Store, I suppose, and then you have to go print it again, which can take several days. Only, fortunately for the App Store, it's only several days, and in this case, it was more like never, because customers would have to buy the service packs and that sort of thing. And you'd have to physically deliver to them, that sort of thing. Anyways, so I thought back to what we did here on a product like this, and a lot of the things we did just wouldn't fly in a startup atmosphere with venture capitalists who want quick turnaround and rapid growth. We're not going to have 6-month-long code freezes. We're not going to do things like that. But one thing we could take over was rigorous automation. So that being unit testing and functional testing and end-to-end testing and all the best kinds of testing. So I looked at what was out there for UI testing, and it was all terrible. I won't dignify most of this with a description, but if you've used any of these tools, they're all terrible for their own reasons. I'll skip as to why for now. So I thought, why not try and build something better? And that's where Appium comes about. So actually, just to quickly say, Appium is using the one on the left, UI automation JavaScript, but we've wrapped it in a convenient protocol there. So for those of you who don't know what Appium is, which apparently is most of you, it is an implementation of the Selenium JSON wire protocol for mobile applications. What that means is you can write tests using the Selenium protocol you already know from your web tests, only you can automate mobile and now desktop applications with that. So you learn nothing new, but now you're more powerful. It's really cool. It's also currently the most popular way to do this sort of thing. So if you haven't heard of it, you should. It has a very simple philosophy. So the first point being, we don't do anything crazy. We don't hack the machine. We don't rootkit. We don't jailbreak, nothing like that. We use only the vendor-supplied, approved automation techniques and technologies. So for iOS, that's UI automation, JavaScript for older versions, XCUI test for iOS 9.3 and above. For Android, that's UI Automator. For most versions of Android, instrumentation for legacy versions, and UI Automator 2 coming soon. It's in beta right now. We also allow you to choose the language you write your tests in. So one sort of roadblock to adoption on the other frameworks was that they required you to learn Ruby, or they required you to use a language you didn't write the app in. We don't do that. Because we bootstrap off of the Selenium protocol all the work they've done to produce bindings in every language, we can then sort of borrow, and now you can code Appium in all those wonderful languages, which include these and many, many more. We also don't modify the application under test. So one thing I'm sure all of you know is when you change the application, you change the application. And so when you automate the application, if you don't use your production build, you're not testing the application you're delivering to consumers. So testers get this. Developers seem to struggle with this idea a bit more, but it is fundamentally different, especially if you're doing something like injecting an HTTP server into an application or using private APIs and things that you shouldn't be using. You're doing something very different. And lastly, we're free and open source. I'm not a hippie, but this project is kind of a hippie sort of thing that I do. Anyways, how does it work? It's quite simple. You have your test script. You send us an HTTP request using whatever language you'd like, using the Selenium bindings for that language. Appium then takes that request, decides which API to call to the mobile device, calls the requisite API, receives the response, translates that into a JSON protocol compliant response for you, and you're better off, and you're none the wiser as to what happened behind the scenes, which is excellent. And this is, I think, one of the most important things that Appium provides over other frameworks is we sort out all the nonsense for you. So whenever Apple has a bug on a specific version of their automation framework, we know how to work around it, and all that logic is built into Appium, which is why you supply the version number in the capabilities. So if you're using iOS 10, we're going to use the XCUI test framework. If you're using iOS 8, we're going to use the UI automation JavaScript framework, but your test still works and you make no changes, which is really, really powerful. So had you written your test in the Apple-sanctioned UI automation JavaScript framework, when iOS 9.3 came out, you'd have had to rewrite all of your tests in Swift. With Appium, that wasn't the case. So people who used Appium, they got iOS 9.3 support a week later when we fixed all the bugs. Other people had to rewrite their entire test suite. So we provide that layer of abstraction for you, which is very, very powerful. So by the numbers in the last 4 years, a lot of stars, a lot of forks, a lot of contributors, a lot of commits, a lot of downloads. I have no idea how many people use Appium right now, but it's somewhere between that number and 1 million, I would guess. We have about 40,000 weekly installs on NPM, and we've two-edged sword fixed 400 issues and had 400 issues that needed fixing. So it's more stable now. 4,000 things aren't going wrong. I guess is the way I'll word it. So what's new with the latest Appium? So first off, this is really, really cool. Windows Universal App Support is in Appium 1.6. This is, to quote Donald Trump, huge. And this had sort of been there in the past by some people from Siberia, from a company who I can't pronounce the name, but it's 2GIS in English. I don't know how to say that. They wrote a framework called Winium that would sort of do this behavior, but then Microsoft saw it and said, well, we can do it better because we're Microsoft, and they did, which is really, really cool. And so now you can automate Windows 10 apps, so desktop and mobile for Windows 10, which is really cool, using Appium and the support's provider Microsoft, so you know it works well. It works better than other things they support. Also, we joined the JavaScript Foundation, so it's no longer, the trademark's no longer owned by a cryptic cult of people. We've given it to a respectable organization that owns the ones for Grunt and jQuery and a few other things, so now they handle all the open source legal nonsense and all that kind of stuff. We don't have to worry about it, so if I melt the space shuttle, it's on them now. Nextly, that's a new word. XUI test iOS backend is now available, so it's now standard. Before you had to sort of summon it up and apply it manually, but now it's just in there. So if you're using iOS 9.3 or iOS 10 or higher, you're going to use the latest automation technology on iOS and not the legacy one. And it mostly works now. Apple finally fixed all of their bugs. We didn't do any work, but they did a lot of work. The UI TV platform is supported. The UI TV platform, for those of you who don't know, is just a platform for writing television apps that's somewhat popular. They wrote their own support, and they contributed to Appium 1.6, so you can automate some TV apps with Appium as well. And then lastly, we have a beta of UI Automator 2 support, which is a framework upgrade for Google for Android devices, so it's a newer framework than the one we've been using. The one we've been using is about 7 or 8 years old now. This one is, I think, 2 or 3 years old. So it works a lot better. What's coming next to get you excited? Mac application support, which I will demo later. Funny story, I wrote a prototype for this maybe 4 years ago, and I figured it just sort of went into the garbage. No one looked at it, and I could not have been more wrong. Many people had used it, but they hadn't told anybody, and then they finally decided to tell me a few months ago and contribute back several years' worth of fixes to it. Which is really, really awesome, because when I wrote it, it barely worked. But now it works really well, because some people have spent years making it work and contributed back. So kudos to the people at Intuit in Mountain View in America who have contributed a working Mac application version of Appium, which we are going to have proper integration for shortly, but we have improper integration for at the moment, which I'll tell you about. We also have new GUIs on the way, which will be written in the Electron framework, which is the framework that several popular desktop apps are written in, like Slack. It's a JavaScript framework that lets you write desktop apps. So the good news is one code base now for our Mac, Windows, and now Linux desktop app. And it'll be tighter integrated with Appium, which is good. And then lastly, Isaac at Sauce is working on better docs and onboarding material. I've seen the beginning of this. It's going to be so much easier to learn Appium than it used to be. I didn't write the last step, but I think I wrote the one before that, and it was terrible. And so this seems really good, and there's going to be lots of code samples in every language we support. So whether you're a Ruby developer, C# developer, Java developer, whatever, you're going to have the tutorial in your language now, which is going to be really, really helpful for people. So let's move on to the first subject of the day. And I'm going to show you a video that sort of hell has frozen over, if you haven't noticed. I think Bash runs on Windows. I installed Visual Studio on my Mac last week. SQL Server runs on Linux. I think I saw Sonic on a Nintendo. I don't know what's happening, but it's happening. And so this is Appium, an open source project, mind you, automating a Windows app. And this is a demo of the calculator app running in 2 different non-Microsoft open source languages. So just take this in for some of you older people here. This is quite startling. Oh, do I have no audio? I don't really need it, but is there any way to full screen this? It's probably big enough. I'll just turn my thing up.
Use whatever language you prefer. Here we have Bash on Windows up, and we're going to use the Linux Python to run a test written in Python to test the inbox calculator app in Windows. We can look at the test. You can see it's in Python. It has the app ID for the inbox calculator, and it's pointing at our Appium server.
Yeah, that's crazy, right?
So Appium really is an incredibly flexible framework, and this is a great example of that. Here's another example of Appium's flexibility. Here's IntelliJ running a test written in Java using JUnit, and we're going to test the inbox Windows calculator. Another great example of how, with Appium, you really can use the language that you prefer, the test runner you prefer, to test your Windows apps.
All right. So for those of you who don't understand what you just saw, I'll repeat it. And for those of you who blacked out, that was a guy from Microsoft, a program manager from Microsoft, showing you how to write a test in Python, an open source language, and Java, an open source language, running inside Bash on Windows, automating a Windows app using an open source project called Appium. That's crazy. Like, for those of you who have just gotten into this is insane. I don't know what this is. This is Trump level crazy. But anyways, it works. So if you have a Windows app that you want to automate with Appium now, don't have to learn anything new. Just use Selenium, and that is built into Appium 1.6. And if you want to see the source for it, they've actually open sourced it. And it's right there, and Microsoft manages it. This is crazy. When I worked there, it was sort of like a don't ask, don't tell. Like, you can't tell, like, I've never seen open source. I don't know what it is. Because legal was always afraid we'd get sued. But they seem to have changed their tune a bit since I left. Anyways, Mac apps work too, and I will do a demo of that right now. So this is awaiting proper integration, but it runs as a standalone separate project at the moment. Over Christmas, I will have some time to neglect my family and properly integrate this. So I'm just going to start up the server right now. And I will show you the same calculator app being automated in a Python script. Less sacrilegious on the Mac. This is two versions, one using mouse events, like action moving the mouse, as you see. Second version using the accessibility layer to just trigger the events. Except the clear button. I guess I forgot to fix that one. But anyway, that was a Mac app being automated with Appium, and if you want to see the source code for it real quick, I'll show you. It's just lovely old Selenium source code. Find elements, send keys, all that lovely stuff. And it all works just the same. Good. Let's get back to slides. All right. Good. Crazy. All right. So now here's the main event. So you've sort of seen a bit of the fringe. Here's the main event. So if you're new to Appium, which it sounds like most of you are, it's just Selenium with one difference, and the difference is how you set it up. And it's not really a difference, it's just that you have to supply additional capabilities to let Appium know how you want to automate your mobile device. So on iOS, you need to provide the path to the application, or if you're using a real device, the ID for the application. So that's the, I forget the name for it on Apple, but it's the com.yourcompany.whatever, that part that you see in the info.p list in your app. Or the app if you're on a simulator. Give us the platform version. That tells Appium which hacks to employ to get Apple's framework to perform properly. Give us a device name, because that also may influence the way we automate things. And then lastly, if you want XCUI test, you use automation name XCUI test. If you want to use UI automation JavaScript, that's the default at the moment, but that will switch soon. And actually, I think in the next release, Appium will probably be smart enough to just look at the version of the phone and use one accordingly. But for now, you actually do have to tell it. And then you just start your new session like you would always by making a new WebDriver object with the path to your WebDriver server and that capability object that you just built. For Android, pretty similar. It's an APK path instead of an app path. You need automation name only to opt into the UI Automator 2 beta. Same thing, platform version. And you can give it a package and activity if you wanted to start the app. It doesn't really matter with Android, as you can automate the whole operating system. So you could start from the home screen if you want, or wherever your phone is. But it's always good to give it that capability so you know you start in a good state, or at least a known state. Finding elements is just as you've become accustomed to in Selenium. A little bit different nomenclature for things. So instead of a B tag or a div or a span, we have by class name, which will find the type of accessibility element, which is what you see in the accessibility inspector and the Appium inspector. So for XCUI test, it looks like XCUI element type and then the type. On the old framework, it was like UI a button. On Android, it's a really, really long Java class. So it's like com.android.widget.tools.something.something. There's some shorthand for that we have. Also, you can find an element by XPath. So we support full XPath. Anything that's valid XPath, you can implement. That's a very simple // which means search infinitely deep. And then we give it a type, and then inside the brackets we have 1, which just means the first one. So pretty simple. But we support contains and wildcards and all sorts of crazy XPaths. So whatever you want to do, And it runs reasonably fast on most of our implementations. Less so on the Mac, but we're working on it. And then lastly, I still recommend that you just ask your developer, or if you are the developer, you put an ID in there, because that's the most reliable, quickest way to do it. So on Android, that's going to be resource ID, which you can put in your XML for your UI, or it may just get generated for you. And then on iOS, you would want to use the thing called accessibility identifier, not accessibility label, not accessibility hint. Those are shown to users with assistive devices, so people with screen readers or other sort of devices for people with, with disabilities. Let's see if we can, maybe this? I don't know. So anyways, you want to use accessibility identifier. Actions are very simple, so we call it click. We all know that it means tap, but we call it click just because we're legacy tied to Selenium. Send keys opens the keyboard, sends some keys. Two-finger tap, you can now do multi-touch. So you use this thing called action chains. So you build an action and then you perform it. So in this case, we add a touch with one finger, add a touch with another, and then we perform it. That is a two-finger touch action. There's all sorts of examples of two-finger swipe, the claw, all the crazy ones they have. You can do all of them with Appium. Web views are another interesting thing. Let me just see if I can... There we go. I think I've got it to stop. I think I've got it. That's good. It's good. All right. Anyways, what you will be seeing up there is that web views are something we can automate. And the way Appium handles web views is that we have this idea of automation context. And I'll have a graphic to illustrate this in a moment. But the idea is that the app runs with several automatable contexts. And so there's by default the native context, which is your Cocoa controls on iOS, or on Android, it's all your Android widget.whatever guys that are part of the material design. And then if you have a UI WebView object for iPhone or WebView for Android, those will show up as separate contexts, and the web content inside of them, the HTML, JavaScript, etc., is a separate context, isolated, encapsulated. So use the context or set context command, depending on which framework, to switch to it. And then you just write Selenium code using CSS selectors and all the fun stuff that you do with Selenium. So it's just Selenium code at that point. Use the Chrome inspector if you want, whatever. So just for a graphical illustration, the things in purple, that is the native context. You can see those are Cocoa controls, like the multiple tab button, the back button, the cell phone signal strength, the clock, the battery. That's all part of the native context. And then this app has a single web context, which has that change.org web page loaded inside of it. And you can see all of those buttons and divs and spans in there. You can automate with Selenium. So by default, you start in the native context, but you can switch to the web context. And then you're running Selenium using Chrome driver or a little thing we put together that automates Safari on iOS. So, and then when you want to go back and use the back button, you can switch out, switch back to the native context, and back and forth as you please. Hopefully that makes some sense. So some more advanced things. This is a cool trick I found from some Portuguese people that showed me this. So the number one question I get about things to automate is text messages and WhatsApps, Facebook messages, that sort of thing. Because people will have like a validation code or something sent to the phone, and they want to know, how do I get that? And there's a trick in the operating system on iOS and Android. I'll show you the iOS version, where you go to your notification settings and you just set them to show up as alerts instead of banners. So here we're going to the Messages app, and we're going to tell it to set to alerts. What alerts do is they're modals that pop up, and then the Appium alert modal processing utilities just work. It's just like a JavaScript alert or anything else you get. So you can read it, you can dismiss it, you can do whatever. So that way when you get that verification code, it will now show up and block your app. And so you won't have to worry about when it shows up and that sort of thing, because you'll be very predictable. I will skip this one for now because it's less relevant. So I also thought I would go through some interesting capabilities on iOS and Android. So there's one called Auto Web View. So we talked about context earlier. So most people want to start in the native context, as that's a native app. But for some of you who work with Cordova apps and PhoneGap apps and things that are web-based, where you just have an app shell that encapsulates a web page, you can use the Auto Web View capability, set it to true, and your app will automatically start in the Selenium context, and you'll be writing web automation against your HTML JavaScript app. So very useful for Cordova apps. For Android, I mentioned all those crazy com.widget.android.whatever stuff. If you've ever looked at the Android UI hierarchy in an inspector, you may have noticed that it's quite deep, and there's a lot of elements that don't seem to have any purpose other than to coordinate or group things in some logical fashion. So we at Appium have decided we can strip those out for you, and that will make XPath and other hierarchy-based operations on Android run a lot quicker for you. Native Web Screenshot, what that will do is instead of using the operating system level screenshot command on Android, you'll use the one from Chrome Driver, which takes a shot of the whole page. So many of you for web pages, you want the whole thing in the screenshot. So that will use the one from Chrome Driver, which talks to the browser to get the screenshot, instead of doing the equivalent of using the hotkeys for a screenshot on an Android device. So you can switch between them depending on what you'd like. For iOS, there's a load. So people frequently hate those, the app would like to use your current location now dialogues. So we have a capability that just accepts all of them. So you'll never have to worry about these showing up in your tests. We will just automatically pre-authorize it, so you'll never get them. But if you still get them, there's the auto accept and dismiss alert capability, which will either automatically accept or dismiss those when they pop up. We also have the native web tap capability. To describe what this does, when you send a click to a web page in a web context in Appium, it goes through Chrome Driver and it gets interpreted directly as JavaScript. So it's not the same as a user actually touching the phone because the operating system doesn't know about it because it's been sent straight to the browser. So with this capability, whenever you send a click inside a web context, instead of Appium sending that to Chrome Driver as a JavaScript event, it's going to send it to the operating system at the center of the element you want to click. And then it will go through the normalized operating system, trickle down to the browser, and be processed. So this can be quite useful for some apps that have some unique capabilities. Not that useful for most of you, but good to know about. The Safari ignore fraud warning, believe it or not, this is actually quite useful. So with the increased importance of SSL and HTTPS that's been put on us by Google, who now will rank your page lower and all sorts of things if it's non-SSL'd, a lot of people run their code in SSL with improper certificates. It really doesn't make sense for all of your test environments to go pay the money and buy a certificate and set it up. It's a lot of work. So frequently, people will be testing against environments which communicate over the HTTPS protocol, but don't have a properly respected and authenticated certificate. So what Safari does to be really helpful is it puts this big warning up telling you you're about to be the victim of something, and that can mess with your automation. What this does is we toggle an operating system setting which says, hey, Safari, we're going to do some risky stuff, just look the other way. And then you won't get that dialog. So you may find that useful if you test on environments with not properly set up SSL, which is quite common. And then lastly, the key, I'll put the two up there. There's two different capabilities that mess with the way that the keyboard works in iOS. So some people like their tests to run fast, so we have a send key strategy called set value that just dismisses the keyboard and sets the value directly on the element. Some people like to watch the person type. That's the one-by-one strategy. Some people kind of want an in-between where it's one word at a time. We can send it that way. So if you use the last method, the keyboard won't even come up. There are lots of issues around the keyboard coming up and not dismissing correctly and that sort of thing, and you can bypass that using the set value strategy. But if you want that more real, authentic, user-y kind of thing, use one-by-one with an inter-key delay of something reasonable for a human being on a phone, so like 200 or 300 milliseconds per key. For children, from my father, maybe more like 2,000 milliseconds per key. Just depends on what you're going for. And then lastly, we do support network conditioning, but only on Android at the moment. Apple doesn't provide us that support, and we've been told by some people who used to work there that it's unlikely they ever will. But anyways, it's in the protocol. And if you want to simulate airplane mode on Android, you use the value 1. There's a nice, it's sort of a bit mask if you look at it. But this table is in the documentation, don't worry. So if you want to try Wi-Fi or data or airplane mode or some combination of them, you can use this set network connection method in Android to do all those sorts of things. Cool. So finally, I have a few more just random things I'll show you. So for those of you who've ever tried to set up a mobile device lab, you know that it's hard and it takes a lot of work and a lot of people And fortunately, there are a lot of people that want to solve that problem for you for a small price. I'm not advertising them here. I'm just saying, don't try and create a mobile device lab. You will waste weeks and weeks and weeks and have very unstable, unreliable automation. Use one of these people, any of them. Does not matter to me. I think some of them are better than others, but I won't share that. But anyways, don't solve this problem yourself. Whatever you do, don't do it. If you want to use real devices, talk to these people, and they can run them in the cloud for you. If you're using simulators, this can be done with Kubernetes and other sorts of things, and Jenkins, it works better. But if you're going to use real devices, use a cloud provider. They also provide some other sort of interesting capabilities like video recording and log processing and configurations of devices and other things that you can find quite useful. Another common question I get that I want to never get again, so I put this video in all my slide decks for the last year, is does Appium support multiple devices? And Appium has always supported multiple devices, but people think that it doesn't, and they say, you're lying, I can't make it work. So I'm going to show you a video, and again, I'll take my headset off, of Appium controlling an entire band for Jonathan. So Appium is going to open 4 Android emulators and an iOS simulator, and 2 are going to play the drums, 2 are going to play the keyboards, and then 1 is going to type the lyrics out for him real quick. And you're going to see Appium controlling 5 devices at once.
Yeah, you can turn off the head mic here.
All right, so there he is, launching the Appium script. And as you see, the drum pads hit. That is Appium sending a tap to that element.
Check.
We have 5 servers of Appium running at once. So there's the hi-hat you hear, that's Appium. The guitar's all Jonathan. You'll see the keys will come in a second, and the lyrics. All right. So there you go. Appium supports at least 5 devices. But for those of you who think, no, Jonathan is a wizard, it is surely some sort of trickery, I present you a different video of Jonah, formerly of Sauce Labs, automating 16 Android devices with 16 Appium servers, I should say, with 1 script. And so I'll just fast forward to the good part. So you can see, you don't need the audio for this, but that is a very large server with a very big power bus to power this many phones. Each phone is being sent one track of the MIDI file, and then it is playing that track. So that sound you hear is 16 Android phones playing Eye of the Tiger, all using Appium to send the different MIDI events. Anyway, so if you want to know how to run Appium multi-device, it's very simple. Appium is a very small, very thin server that takes up almost no CPU or memory. You can run as many as you'd like, and you won't hurt your machine at all, because we've written it to be very, very thin. So just launch them on different ports, use different unique device identifiers for each device, and you're golden. It just works. So hopefully I never hear that question again. But I'm sure I will. And then lastly, I always just like to show off the robotic end of Appium, which currently is not working at the moment, but once again I have more excuse to neglect my family over Christmas and fix this. So one cool thing about Appium, and I'll just show you what happens first, and then I'll explain what it is. So you're about to see the what I call the world's first robotically sent tweet. No one has ever questioned me on this, so I keep saying it. I think it is. Jason and I did this 4 years ago, maybe, at a conference in Boston, I want to say. But that's an Appium script controlling a robot that's then touching a mobile phone. And you may say, what? But I'll explain to you how it sort of works and how Appium supports this. So it's kind of simple when you think about it. We have an app that we've written for iOS that whenever you touch a point on the screen, all it does is display a UI element with the coordinates that you're touching. So we launched that with Appium connected to it. Underneath the device, we have the device lower its finger centimeter by centimeter until it makes contact with the phone. At that point, Appium will detect that there's a UI element. It will read the coordinates that it displays. Then it will repeat with 2 additional points in the north or west direction, whatever we'd like. And then now we have 3 points in the physical world, because the robot knows where it's moved to, and 3 points in the virtual automation world of the device that Appium knows about. And we're able to build a matrix to translate between these 2 coordinate systems. So there's a bit of math. At one point I understood this, but it's been a while since I did. But the gist is, you've got 3 knowns and 3 unknowns, and those of you who take a linear algebra means you have an answer for everything, right? So we have 3 points and we have 3 unknowns. We build a matrix, and we can translate between the 2 systems. So when you run Appium with the robot, which will work with older versions of iOS at this point, Appium 1.5 or lower, instead of sending the touch events to the automation API, it will just send them to the robot, who will then know where everything is because of math, and it will all just work. So your existing tests just work with robots. You just didn't know it. So it's open hardware. It's free on the internet. Tindy.com or tapsterbot.com if you'd like to buy one pre-assembled. You can print your own. It's quite cheap. It's like 30 euros maybe to make your own. Something like that. Anyway, so I saved a little bit of time for questions, and then I have a little bit after. So we got about 10 minutes for questions. I will answer anything. Sure, let's let someone bring you a microphone.
Господа, сразу мастер-класс. Микрофон держим перпендикулярно плоскости рта, да, когда говорим. Тогда все ваши вопросы будут хорошо слышны, и они запишутся. Спасибо.
Hello, my name is Andrei. Welcome to Moscow.
Thank you.
And my question is, you mentioned the GUI for Appium. Could you tell a bit more about that, what it's for?
All right. So Appium has a graphical user interface, or GUI, for developing Appium tests. So it'll let you do things like open the application and click on different parts of the screen and see all the metadata about the different elements in the DOM or the UI hierarchy. It can also do record and playback, so you can tap and select different events, and then Appium can replay them for you and that sort of thing. It hasn't been developed really in the last year and a half, because I haven't had time to maintain it, but the good news is the people from the Appium project have taken it over and rewritten it, and in the next couple of weeks or so, I think, don't quote me on that, this is being video recorded, so please bleep that out, whatever that estimate was. It should be ready, and there's currently a beta actually ready for you to use that I don't think it does record and playback yet, but it does most of the other stuff I just mentioned. So that's what it's there. It's there to help you. I wish I should have done a demo of it, but I don't want to demo the old dying one because it's dead and there's a new one that will do its work, and hopefully in 3 or 4 weeks I can demo that. Also bleep that. Whoever, I'm not getting involved in this.
Hello, my name is Anton, and the question is, what actually your calculator tests? Can you read back the results?
Yes, you have full access to the entire. So I'll explain the way that it works. So are you talking about the Mac one or the Windows one? Are you talking about the Mac one or the Windows one? The Mac one. I'll do the Mac one because I know the answer to that. So the way that Appium for Mac works is it uses the API Apple provides for vendors of assisted devices for handicapped people. So people who are blind, they have devices they can attach to their phone or programs they can run alongside that describe for them what's being presented in the user interface. And so in order to do that, they have to have full access to what's being displayed on the screen and full access to be able to manipulate what's on the screen. So using these C APIs that Apple provides, we've written Appium for Mac, or Windows works the same way. So we have full access to everything displayed, everything you can tap, everything you can touch. So yes, we can read what's on the screen. We can touch everything that's on the screen, just like we're a blind person.
Hi. Related question with previous guys. Well, can we somehow customize recorded script after recording easily? And let's say add some variables and something like this.
So, if you're referring to the Appium GUI, right? Yeah. Okay. So the old GUI would not allow you to change the script after you created it. I can't speak as to what the new GUI will do, but I suppose I will just utter the platitude that the GUI is there to help you develop. It should not be the IDE for you to write the tests in. You should use something like IntelliJ or Visual Studio or whatever, Charm, PyCharm or something to develop the test in. It's just sort of like a scratchpad for like, will it respond to if I try this on it? Is this the correct way to build this locator? It's there as like an assistive device. Please don't base your automation framework around running tests inside of it. Yeah.
Hey, my name is Vadim. Thanks for the overview of Appium. So I actually have 2 questions. The first one is, compared to the Mac version of the inspector, the Windows version actually sucks. How come, and are you going to do anything about it?
All right, so I wrote both of those, I think, so I'm not offended. Well, I am offended and not offended at the same time. If that makes No, actually, I don't think I wrote the Windows Inspector. I wrote the other Windows. Anyway, the good news is it's all being rewritten right now, and so they will both be the same program in a few bleep. So in a few bleep, they will all be the same program, and they will either suck or be awesome accordingly in unison.
Depending on in which direction you go. Right.
They should be very awesome. Jonathan is a very skilled developer, and I'm sure he will do an excellent job on them.
The Mac version is actually awesome. So
I wrote that one, so.
Well done. And the second question is, have you tried using Appium with React Native applications?
Personally, I have not. I have heard that it works from other people, and I've heard grumblings that it does not work. But I've definitely heard people who've had success. So I believe it is possible, but I do not have the answer for that. I don't know why it wouldn't be.
There might be troubles. I'm not sure myself because I have not either. But
I've definitely heard recently from people who've had success with it, but I've personally not tried that.
Thanks a lot.
All right, what's time?
One more question about Appium and about system alerts, system controls, and so on. You talked about changing application. I'm talking about mobile testing. You talked about changing application, as I guess you talked about Calabash framework, as I understand, HTTP server built in the application. So my question is, can Appium work these system alerts and system controls on the Android platform? Let's say if we have some system alert about location services and so on, can we approve them? Can we check them? And
okay, so to answer your question, you asked about Android. On Android, you certainly can. The way that the UI Automator framework is set up is it's not scoped inside the application like the one on iOS used to be. It's scoped on the entire operating system. So you can launch applications that you don't have the source code for, and you can work on phones as long as they have debugging enabled, so apps that you've installed from the Play Store. So yeah, you can inspect them with, I don't know if UI Automator Viewer will work for that, but you can certainly use the Accessibility Inspector on Android for that, and Appium will certainly work with it. So yes, to answer your question, yes, you can automate system applications like the preferences. You will have to UI automate. Well, I think if you know the package name and activity, it should work. So yeah, you can. They're fully automatable. I'm trying just not to like say something that's not true, but I'll just say they're fully automatable, and I'm pretty confident in that. All right, I think I have about 5 minutes left-ish. So I always close with other stuff because I think it's interesting. So I'd like to leave you all with a takeaway, and I'm very glad the first speaker sort of already did my job for me. But I swear this was in the slides before I heard him talk. He didn't inspire me for this. He inspired me in other ways. So working on this project, I have learned one interesting thing, and I'd like to share it with all of you. And I would think the world would be a better place if everyone thought like this. So Steve Jobs once said, life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact. Everything that you call life was made up by people that are no smarter than you, and you can change it, you can influence it, you can build your own things that other people can use. Once you learn that, you will never be the same again. So, as you remember from the story of Appium earlier, I looked at what was out there, what Facebook was doing, what Google was doing. I thought this has to be wrong, despite the fact that the experts are doing all this stuff. As you guys should be very skeptical of everything you hear at the conference today, much like Ilari told you earlier. So, look at the world through a very skeptical tester's lens. Test everything, right? So just because I'm up here and I'm talking to you and someone obviously, thought me cool enough to bring me out here doesn't mean I know anything. And it doesn't even mean that Appium is great. I would love it if one of you came up with something better than Appium. I hear a lot of people struggling to use it. I'm sure there must be a better way. So if you have any cool ideas, please go to conferences. Please share them with people. Please write blogs. Please post code to GitHub. Please share your ideas with people. It's through the exchange of ideas that we actually make better and better things. And so, fortunately, like 5 years ago, I went to a conference, and I was laughed out of the building when I showed Appium to people. I literally was. They admitted it. I spoke at that same conference again like 3 months ago, and they said, this is the guy we laughed out of the building 5 years ago. And so they let me actually talk at the conference next time. So anyways, you may be laughed at, and your ideas may be terrible too. Most of mine are, so your mileage may vary. Your ideas may be terrible, but please share them with people, because while there's like a 99.9% chance they're stupid, there's like a 0.01% chance they aren't. And it's hard to know which before you share them with people. And even after, it's hard to know. So please share them with people and question everything you see. Just because someone works at SpaceX and they can land a rocket on a barge doesn't mean they know shit, right? That's the way I would put it. So if you want to learn more about Appium, here's some stuff. There's a Slack channel, invitation only, not by choice. But if you want to join, we'll be glad to have you. We approve everybody. Even ISIS. We'll approve anybody if they want to join our channel. So if you're an ISIS, feel free to join. I'd be happy if they were using Appium as another customer. I don't make any money off this, so no one's going to go hungry if anyone kills Appium. Like, my kids will still eat. I don't have any kids, but if I did, they would still eat. There's no money in open source software, I assure you. So anyways, test everything you hear at this conference and contribute your own ideas, because 4 or 5 years ago, I was just one of you, and I'm no smarter than you. I know nothing that you don't know. You're capable of doing this too. So please share your ideas and test everything you hear. Thank you.